All right, welcome to Talking with Famous People. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People, host Zachary, the INTP. We have our host of Talking with Famous People, Eric, the ENTP. We have John Sullivan, famous person John Sullivan, famous person Tiffany, and I think that's it. Yeah. So in this video, we're going to discuss inaction, things that could possibly lead to inaction, um, reasons one might choose to prefer to not act over act. Things like that. So,
Well,
I think the nature of this topic is indicative of our level of conversation at the moment.
Well, me for one, when it comes to inaction, the biggest thing for me is I'm very good at pulling myself out of a bad situation that's kind of come up from inaction at the last second. And I don't know if that's my mind waiting, as kind of Eric said, for it to kind of pick up the right solution from the right place in the external world, or if that's just me being lazy and then really good at pulling myself out at the last second. I think it's probably sometimes a little bit of both.
I uh, I
and
feel
he
like
does love the 11th hour. Go
um, I
ahead, sorry to interrupt.
I don't know if this is something that's exclusive to. I think it could happen to most of the types, or all, or possibly all of them. But I just feel like I just have a hard time doing things if I have no extrinsic motivation toward it. I mean, even the things that I participate in, um, I guess like recreationally, such as like if I like study a particular subject, there's still like an extrinsic motivator there because the motivation would be to sort of I feel have an obligation to develop an understanding, right? So like my
That's not extrinsic though. That's
intrinsic, yeah.
intrinsic.
Well, I mean, I think that sometimes it can be extrinsic though. Like for example, uh, like when how this year this is the first year that I'll be voting, so I've tried to make at least an effort to inform myself on our current I guess political environment, and that's sort of extrinsic, right? There's an even though it's an intrinsic thing that I chose to do that recreationally, it's sort of a there is an external factor there. I think there always lies some external factor regardless of whether it's something you choose to do on your own or something that you feel obligated to do.
But
I'll
but
do something for nothing.
I think that the key definitional difference between extrinsic is either intentionally incentivizing or disincentivizing a specific behavior. The behavior is specifically incentivized or disincentivized by another agent or force, and then not just like by a state of reality like you're saying, but rather because somebody's saying, "I'll pay you to do something." That's extrinsic motivation, or "I'll punish you if you don't do it." That's extrinsic motivation. Stuff like you're talking about is you manifesting Zachary in the world. That's intrinsic motivation,
I
I think.
suppose that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Extrinsic definitely seems to be more of an immediate external factor, an immediate vector. You know.
But the question, I guess, becomes asked: what constitutes action? A lot of people feel like they're stuck in an inaction loop if they're just sitting around thinking about stuff. But I think that might depend on personality type. John, you have any thoughts about what constitutes action?
So I'm just thinking about what you guys are talking. Would thought would the would mulling over something count as action? Trying to think of the steps that you would take to go towards action.
I think that I think there yeah there I think you could definitely differentiate between active thinking and passive thinking, right? Passive thinking
Okay.
being the type of I don't know, thinking about something that's if you're actively thinking about how to approach a situation, I think that's beneficial. I would consider that ultimately productive. But I mean, obviously, there has to be a transition from the internal to the external eventually, or it won't be productive. But it's sort of like reloading. It's sort of like gathering your ammunition, right, before you shoot your load.
I definitely agree that you gotta include active thinking in acting. We're active versus inactive, but at the same time, that kind of passive, inactive thinking, that's when us extroverted intuition people, we have our best ideas. So it's hard to disqualify that time either.
That's a good point too. I think the NE sometimes works unconsciously, right? Have you ever like studied a topic for a while and or tried to figure out something, or kind of like okay, like video games? Have you ever like tried to beat a boss in a video game and just could not do it, and then you go out and fucking like hang out with a friend or a family member or something, and you come back and you just first time like you're just able to get it down.
That's NI. That's NI.
Oh yeah, that's rejecting like learned muscle memory in that case because you stay away from the task and then you readjust accordingly later. And
Like
Yeah.
when you
that's
go to sleep, right? When you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning and then all of a sudden you could do it, that means NI did something when you were sleeping.
I've had to like
inform me what NI is again,
NI is
so I
like
can understand.
it's like well in the Jungian model it would be introverted intuition, and it basically manifests
Uh,
as unconscious understandings of stuff. Basically that's a really
Mhm.
gimp way of explaining it, but um, it's like
I
Is that where that comes from? How
I
the
mean,
fuck am I supposed to say that name? I'm gonna call
just to
you
like give it some to give your
Philskis.
example some concreteness. But I mean that's what happens with me. You know, it's like the video games thing. You know, I'll learn a certain pattern of like playing a game, and it will be incorrect, and you know I'll still think trying to repeat that pattern be incorrect, and it just gets so ingrained into your muscle memory that you just like okay I can't play this. It's done. Then you go away for a few hours a day, 2 days. You come back, and some of that muscle memory has left you. Then the game might inform you to a different pattern that you'll then learn, and that'll be successful. That's
yeah,
usually how it goes for me.
yeah, that's a I think that's an interesting phenomenon too. I mean I feel that happens to me even with I read a lot about like a topic, and I feel like I really want to have a concrete understanding of it until I get into a position where I'm explaining it to someone, and or like I feel like that's why I rant so much to my friends, because when I'm like just monologuing, I feel or sometimes I realize I have a better understanding of it than I thought I did, and it kind of happened unconsciously, right? And then as soon as I start like vocalizing my thoughts, the connections are made, and then it just seems like everything falls into place. And there needs to be some sort of inaction regarding everything to kind of have time to categorize. There's some like unconscious systems that I'm sure someone familiar with the biological faculties of the brain could explain it properly, but it's a
well,
really interesting phenomenon.
I have a slightly different kind of phenomenon that I would experience. For me, the situation might be, okay, I have a problem at work that I can't solve, and it involves permissions with a computer, and and I can't figure it out. So later on that day, I am watching a movie, and it has to do with like a bank robbery, and some in some weird way some talking about getting into a locked door a certain way, and that's going to click something in my head to do with the permissions problem I had at work, and that's how I figure it out. So it's not so much like unconscious, I go to sleep and my brain works it out, or I get away from a problem for long enough. I just need to get far enough away physically, mentally, out there until some random idea pops into my head that makes it all click.
I usually find that comes from becoming mentally unstuck in the situation because it's usually the repeated action of doing something, trying to solve something the same way over and over again. That your mind just can't think of any other way to do it. And once you get away from that, you have the ability to think more over it. When you're not in the situation, then you can think of alternate solutions and then possibly come to the correct one.
Hmm. Yeah, it's it's very it's great when many times in class I've like I did this with all my lectures I had to give this last semester. I would binge all of the information like a night before, and then I'd wake up and I would have just enough understanding to go in and just like just talk and just sort of wing it. And thankfully my faculties were allowed me to do that and get by it at a minimum, so I didn't have to to get actually develop a concrete understanding of that shit.
Um, I think that inaction is uh, inaction it's a frenemy, right? It's a frenemy because sometimes it kills you if you wait too long, if you hesitate too long. But for an ENTP, I see inaction a lot of times as being my NI just saying, I know you don't understand why, and I know you want to just fucking bull ahead into everything, and I can't convince you because I'm NI that you should listen to me. So I'm gonna manipulate you somehow secretly to make you drag your feet and be lazy, extra lazy about this. But then sometimes it's not that, and it's hard to say necessarily.
I think that's probably like mastering your personality, figuring out when you're using it positively and when you're using it negatively.
Do I get
And
a
then I'm
certificate
also
when I master it? I want a certificate when I master it.
Master ENTP.
Yes.
Black
I'm
Like,
belt.
also
yeah, I want a belt. I want it to be the top level belt is yellow with green specks on it.
That's the top level ENTP belt for
Yeah.
personality. Zach, what would the INTP belt be?
The you get you receive an award for a nice cabin in the woods, and you move and you live an ascetic lifestyle for the rest of your existence.
I think the belt will be brown and functional.
It'll
It'll
just
be
be
like,
a regular belt. It won't even
yeah,
say.
just a regular belt that they got at Sears. The
Yeah,
ITV
they
belt they bought it
belt.
yeah,
and it holds up their
maybe
pants.
Peebles or something.
it's a tool belt. It's a tool belt.
Yeah, that's possible too.
That's
You're
for the
like, what color belt is the
ISTPs.
I? What color belt is the ISTPs? Yeah, that's like, what do you mean? Belts have colors? The INTP is gonna be like, well, it's brown. I got it at Sears. It holds up my pants. Why? And ENTP will be like, ooh, I know. Let's do blah 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 blah
Like
blah.
10 different colors on it, and there has to be stripes.
Right.
That's
Little bells and whistles, all
everybody,
kinds of
everyone has
shit.
to look at me and go, "Wow, that person is weird."
Right. For some reason, we like that. Why is it that we like that? People look at me and say that all the time, and I think to myself, there.
I
There, I succeeded. He thinks I'm weird.
As long as they're okay with me being weird. When someone isn't okay with me being weird, then I get offended.
um. So, any other thoughts on inaction?
To counter inaction, if you're an ITP or really any type, if you're pressing it a lot, the best way to get over that is to just make yourself do it. Because I find that once you start doing an activity that you're dreading, once you're like 5 minutes into it, it sucks you in so much that you just don't even you just forget about it. You know, that's the best way to counter it is to just fucking make yourself do shit. I had
Give
to
yourself permission to stop after 2 sentences.
wait. Say again. You cut out.
You give yourself permission to stop after 2 sentences, but then you probably won't. You probably get, well, I get 4 sentences, or whatever it is you're doing. So you go, all right, I'm just gonna start this fucking thing, but I am literally gonna do 2 sentences and stop. And then you get your 2 sentences you're done, and you're like, well, I might as well do 4 sentences. Like that's
No,
the trick.
I was
Back when,
also thinking,
yeah.
what about tasks that force you to be inactive? Time sensitive. That if you do something immediately, come back to bite you.
Things are remarkably less time sensitive than we think. A lot of things.
How do you mean?
I freak
I mean-
out over every little thing at work. Everything is a time emergency, and my job, it kind of is, but it still isn't. And I'm always hounding my supervisor and my coworkers when I need something, like, oh, it's important, we gotta go right now. And it's always like, chill out. It's gonna be fine. Like, we have time. And it's always true. We always have more time than I think. People are never in as much of a rush as I think they're in. Like, sometimes you just need to slow down.
And even if you think you miss a date or a deadline that's important, for most things that aren't like file your application by now or you're excluded or whatever, For most things, there's some alternate. It opens up new possibilities to have missed that may prove preferable than having gone with the original thing anyway. If it was really that great, you would have been more enthusiastic about it, and you would have gone with it.
Maybe.
That's one possibility.
I think you give people too much credit, Eric.
Who? Which people? See, everybody else is like worried about the common man or whatever being different. I worry about myself being fine. That's it. Everybody else, I assume, is just as good and just as capable of handling shit as anybody else. I'm totally incapable of handling shit, yet I manage to somehow get through life okay. If I can get through life okay without complete collapse and disaster, then really anybody should be able to.
Is that how you see it?
I mean, I'm a fucking mess. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, but different kinds of messes. You're not the same kind of mess as someone else that's a mess.
Well,
There's a difference between organized and disorganized mess.
I'm a disorganized mess.
I would say I'm an
But
organized mess.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You'd be a little bit more organized than me.
The
Periodically,
problem is
when
I
make
just
video
don't.
badness,
I don't always. Follow the organization how I set it up, right? Like,
do you want to change it?
yeah. Or it always just like I try to operate systematically and methodically, but then something always goes differently.
Life doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Life don't work like computers. Well, I think computers are pretty stupid, so.
There's an Ajahn Brahm quote. Is this I believe he's a Tibetan monk, and it's something like, if you don't worry about your future, like, everything goes wrong, but if you worry about your future, everything goes wrong anyway. So whatever. I really
Well,
butchered that quote. I paraphrased the shit out of that and butchered it, but you get the gist of it.
Here's an equivalent quote that a friend I had in China, said to me. He said, Eric, he had a Spanish accent. He was like a Spaniard, right?
In China.
Eric, yeah, he was. He was from Spain, but he lived in China. I mean, everybody I knew in China was an expat from someplace other than China. He said, Eric, listen, life is a shit sandwich, and it's always lunchtime.
What the fuck?
That's what he said to me.
Tiffany's face sums up that.
Life is a shit sandwich, and it's always lunchtime.
Oh, that's some
really
top
that
tier
bad?
wisdom.
Yeah. That must be a translation of an old Spanish idiom or something. I don't know.
So that was his metaphysics theory that he was working on. That is really just
Yeah, it was years. It was years, I think.
Yeah, it was just life was really just various manifestations of the same shit sandwich at its core, at its essence. So perhaps that's the answer to my question, or to the question, Eric. That's what the essence is. It's a shit sandwich.
It's a shit sandwich. And it's always lunchtime. That's the important thing to remember. God, will this lunch ever end? Just like shit sandwich after shit sandwich being put in front of you. Anyway, that's that's another way of expressing the nihilist philosophy, I suppose. So inaction, I don't know if we were very active in conquering the issue of inaction, but we did say some things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had fun.
All right.
And I will say, the last comment is this, which is, to solve inaction, take action.
Can't argue that.